From trailblazer to lightning rod, Tiffany Henyard's journey from celebrated icon to controversial figure has plunged Dalton into a full-blown political crisis. Once hailed as a historic leader, Henyard made waves as the first woman to serve. As mayor of Dalton, Illinois, a young, ambitious black woman who shattered glass ceilings and promised to usher in a new era of progress, inclusion, and bold transformation. Her election was seen as a turning point, a break from a stagnant, political past. She became the face of hope for a community long plagued by neglect and red tape. But that moment of triumph quickly gave way to turmoil, as her administration was soon mired in a deepening storm of scandal, fueled by accusations of corruption, financial misconduct, and unchecked power. At first, Henyard's leadership felt like the fresh start Dalton desperately needed. Her win was more than symbolic. It was seen as a statement, a win for representation, a new chapter. But slowly, that hopeful narrative began to unravel. Whispers turned to headlines. Reports of unethical behavior and administrative overreach started making waves, and trust in the woman once seen as a political breakthrough began to crumble. At the heart of the growing backlash was a troubling pattern. Henyard repeatedly placed close allies, many lacking experience, into powerful roles. From village attorney to police chief and top administrative positions, appointments were made without proper background checks or board approval. Critics say it wasn't about competence, it was about control, that she was building a government not to serve the people, but to protect her power. Her refusal to respect legal norms, failing to seek board approvals, and bypassing protocol led to a series of legal battles and widened the rift between her and Dalton's governing institutions. As pressure mounted, Henyard doubled down. Her leadership grew more combative, ignoring court orders and dismissing board objections. What started as bold leadership soon felt like unchecked authority. Then came the financial questions. Reports surfaced that Henyard may have been misusing public funds, spending taxpayer money on luxury travel, excessive purchases, and personal indulgences, all while the village itself struggled to afford basic services. The mayor, critics argued, was living a lifestyle that far exceeded what her public salary could sustain. Things hit a boiling point when a key witness, rumored to be a former romantic partner, came forward with explosive allegations. They claimed Henyard accepted bribes from local business owners, offering fast-tracked permits and special treatment in return. If true, it pointed to something deeper, systemic corruption that went far beyond personal perks, into the territory of power used for political and financial gain. The fallout was swift. Residents who had once believed in Henyard, who saw her as the one to revive Dalton, felt betrayed. They had invested hope in her leadership, only to be met with the reality that their mayor may have used that trust for her own benefit. As the storm grew, Henyard's administration began to close ranks. Her inner circle, made up of appointees whose qualifications were under scrutiny from day one, failed to calm the outrage. To many, these positions weren't about running the village. They were about protecting Henyard. And as criticism mounted, that protection became her only defense. Accountability was nowhere to be found, and the result was a local government consumed by dysfunction and bitter infighting. Despite mounting evidence and growing public outrage, Tiffany Henyard held her ground. She insisted she was innocent, calling the allegations politically motivated attacks meant to sabotage her leadership. But as her relationships with former allies grew increasingly strained and her behind-the-scenes political moves raised more red flags, the public started asking tough questions. What once seemed like partisan noise was now beginning to look like a damning indictment of her entire administration. The tipping point came when new witnesses stepped forward, adding more weight to the growing list of corruption claims. These testimonies painted a disturbing portrait of a leader who wasn't just bending the rules, but actively manipulating the system for personal gain. Concrete evidence showed municipal funds were allegedly spent on luxury expenses, while critical, public programs were left to suffer. And just when it seemed the scandal couldn't get any worse, it did. The FBI got involved. Federal investigators launched a probe into the handling of state and village funds, looking into possible violations in how public money was being distributed and whether contracts were being awarded illegally. The presence of federal authorities confirmed what many feared. This wasn't just a local crisis, it was something far bigger. But even as the legal pressure intensified, Henyard's defiance never wavered. She continued to bypass the Board of Trustees, ignored court orders, and made unilateral decisions without oversight. Her refusal to follow judicial rulings became a symbol of the growing erosion of democratic norms in Dalton. What began as a historic new chapter had spiraled into total chaos. The community's response was immediate and fierce. Town hall meetings were packed with outraged residents demanding answers, demanding justice, demanding action. Longtime supporters publicly turned their backs. Calls for Henyard's resignation echoed through the streets. Dalton was no longer celebrating a breakthrough. They were reckoning with a betrayal. As more damaging evidence came to light, Henyard's political future looked bleak. The woman once praised for breaking barriers now faced the threat of federal charges and the complete collapse of her career. The community no longer saw her as a leader, but as a warning. The damage done to Dalton went beyond just money. Financially, the village was struggling to stay afloat, but the deeper scars were political and emotional. Trust in leadership had been shattered. Faith in the systems meant to protect the people had eroded. The hope that came with her election had been replaced by disappointment, disillusionment, and distrust. Even as investigations continued, one thing had already become clear. Tiffany Henyard's story, once an inspiring tale of change, had turned into a sobering lesson about what happens when ambition goes unchecked. The same boldness, confidence, and rebellious spirit that once made her stand out were now being seen in a new light, as signs of a leadership fueled more by ego than by service. In the end, the scandal surrounding Tiffany Henyard is bigger than just one politician's fall from grace. It's a harsh reminder of why transparency, accountability, and humility matter. Dalton, a village that once celebrated a groundbreaking victory, now faces the uphill battle of rebuilding from political and moral collapse. Henyard's meteoric rise and her stunning downfall will be remembered. Not just as a cautionary tale, but as a warning. Real leadership isn't about breaking barriers or holding titles. It's about serving with integrity. Without that, even the most promising political legacies can end in scandal, betrayal, and complete collapse. Appointing loyal but unqualified allies to critical village roles, Tiffany Henyard bypassed legal processes and sidelined the authority of the village board. Critics say this wasn't just about bad governance. It was about consolidating power for personal and political gain. Transparency and accountability were pushed aside, and the rift between Henyard's office and other officials deepened, igniting what would become a prolonged leadership crisis. Allegations piled up. Misuse of municipal funds, extravagant travel, taxpayer dollars spent on personal luxuries, and shady deals with local businesses. Claims of bribery and favoritism surfaced, with reports that permits and public contracts were being fast-tracked in exchange for kickbacks. Meanwhile, essential services across the village were left underfunded and neglected. Then, the scandal took an explosive personal turn. A key witness, reportedly Henyard's former boyfriend, came forward with damning testimony. His statements shook the already fractured community, painting a devastating picture of a mayor who used her power to enrich herself and those closest to her, all while the people of Dalton paid the price. Henyard's reaction to the escalating crisis only made things worse. During a tense court appearance, she became visibly emotional, an outburst many saw as a leader cracking under pressure. Online, the backlash was instant. Social media erupted with anger, hashtags calling for her. Resignation trended and public trust plummeted even further. But instead of addressing the scandal head-on, Henyard doubled down. At a critical village board meeting, she showed up late and delivered remarks met with boos and eye rolls. She ignored the public outcry and pressed forward with her agenda, refusing to even acknowledge the growing list of accusations. Her apparent indifference only widened the disconnect between her and the very people she was elected to serve. The fallout was massive. Dalton, once filled with hope, now found itself drowning in political and financial chaos. Residents demanded answers. Where had their tax money gone? Why were public schools, roads, and health services being ignored while the mayor allegedly lived lavishly? Then came more revelations. State transparency laws had been violated by Henyard's administration. Tensions soared. And all the while, federal investigators who had reportedly been tracking Henyard's financial activity for nearly a year began closing in. Their probe uncovered questionable transactions, suspected embezzlement, and potential misuse of public funds. Several of Henyard's closest allies also fell under scrutiny, revealing that the alleged corruption may have extended far beyond just one person. As the pressure mounted, Henyard's grip on power slipped. Her once loyal base had largely abandoned her. The community, feeling deceived and disillusioned, demanded sweeping change. The woman once seen as a bold symbol of progress was now viewed as a leader whose unchecked ambition had corroded the very foundation of the government she swore to protect. In a last-ditch effort to rally her followers, Henyard posted a cryptic message on social media, quoting scripture. "If God is for us, who can be against us?" But instead of rallying support, it backfired, seen as tone-deaf and out of touch, a desperate attempt to deflect from the real crisis at hand. As the federal investigation gained steam and pressure from residents and officials intensified, Henyard's political future appeared all but finished. Her administration, once called groundbreaking, had become synonymous with secrecy, dysfunction, and betrayal. The village she promised to uplift was now left with broken trust and institutional collapse. Dalton's road to recovery won't be easy. The damage done by alleged corruption, mismanagement, and the erosion of public faith has left deep scars. Rebuilding will take time. Restoring trust, reestablishing transparency, and bringing back ethical leadership are now top priorities for a town that once believed in transformation, but got turmoil instead. Tiffany Henyard's rise and fall is a powerful reminder. Leadership isn't about being the first. It's not about image or ambition. It's about integrity, accountability, and truly serving the people. Without those core principles, even the most promising political journeys can end in betrayal and chaos. Her downfall has left Dalton reeling. What was once a beacon of progress is now a cautionary tale, a reminder that when power goes unchecked, the cost is paid by the very people leaders are sworn to protect. While Dalton's core services, public health, infrastructure, and education, remained critically underfunded, Mayor Tiffany Henyard's alleged spending on lavish and unnecessary purchases continued to spark outrage. As the full scope of her alleged misconduct came into focus, even her closest allies began to back away. Local politicians who once championed her historic rise were now publicly denouncing her. One trustee even called for her resignation, urging that Dalton desperately needed real leadership to move forward. It was a dramatic shift in the town's political landscape. Henyard's once solid inner circle had begun to fracture under the weight of the scandal. What started as murmurs of mismanagement had spiraled into a full-blown investigation, one with the power to dismantle not just a mayor's reputation, but the legitimacy of Dalton's entire political system. The damage wasn't just personal. Henyard's actions threatened the very fabric of governance in Dalton. With confidence in local leadership shattered, residents were left wondering if the system could ever fully recover. Despite a flood of evidence and rising demands for accountability, Henyard stayed defiant. She denied the allegations, refused to engage the public, and ignored repeated calls for clarity. Her silence wasn't calming the storm, it was feeding it. The bond between the mayor and the people who once celebrated her victory was broken, and every public appearance became a flashpoint. At one explosive village board meeting, Henyard arrived late, clutching a prepared speech. She took the mic, but her words were drowned in audible disapproval. Her tone came off as dismissive, and her emotional outbursts did little to restore credibility. To many, it was proof she had lost touch with the people who had once believed she was going to lead them into a better future. As the federal investigation pushed deeper into her finances, more disturbing revelations surfaced. Allegations of misappropriated funds, secretive deals, and political favoritism were stacking. What had been a quiet legal matter now exploded into a national scandal. Legal analysts warned of serious consequences. Criminal charges weren't just possible, they were becoming likely. Then came another twist. In what seemed like a desperate attempt to regain control, Henyard took to social media with a cryptic, faith-filled message. "If God is for us, who can be against us?" But instead of sparking support, the post was met with widespread mockery. Critics called it tone-deaf, a hollow gesture from a leader accused of deep betrayal. The message only widened the gap between Henyard and the community she had promised to serve. Meanwhile, public pressure continued to mount. Local leaders demanded action, residents demanded answers, and the federal probe, quietly building for nearly a year, was now front and center. Investigators turned their focus toward financial misdeeds, and members of Henyard's inner circle were also placed under scrutiny. The storm that had started with rumors was now a political reckoning. Dalton was facing a harsh reality, not just about Henyard's leadership, but about the system itself. Could a political structure so deeply shaken by scandal be rebuilt? Could residents ever trust their elected officials again? The fallout exposed deep flaws, gaps in oversight, weak transparency measures, and a lack of accountability. But more than anything, it dealt a devastating blow to the community's spirit. A village once filled with pride over a trailblazing mayor now found itself grappling with disillusionment and division. What had started as a moment of celebration had become a warning about unchecked power and the cost of political ambition unmoored from public service. As the investigation reaches its climax, Dalton remains in limbo. Will Henyard step down or be forced out through legal means? The outcome remains uncertain. But what is clear is this: Dalton's political future is in crisis, and the wounds of this scandal will take years to heal. Now the real question emerges. What comes next? Can trust be rebuilt from the ashes? Can a new generation of leadership emerge from the ruins of dysfunction? Can the people of Dalton reclaim what was lost? Tiffany Henyard's fall from grace is more than just a scandal. It's a powerful reminder that public office demands more than ambition and history-making headlines. It demands integrity, it demands accountability, and it demands a commitment to serve the people, not yourself. Her legacy, once filled with promise, now stands as a symbol of the very corruption she vowed to fight. And as Dalton looks toward a difficult, uncertain future, one truth remains. Recovery won't be easy, but it must begin.